Hello, and welcome to episode 305 of the Extraordinary Business Book Club. It's the 6th of February 2022 as I'm recording this, and we're on snowdrop watch here. I haven't seen a single one yet, so we're heading off to Tatton Park this afternoon, where apparently they have lots. I don't know about you, but I need to see a snowdrop at this time of year. I just need to know it's all going to be okay. I did see daffodil shoots on my run this morning out on the Whitegate Way, and that's promising, but I want actual flowers in the actual ground, and I want lots of them. The novelty has properly worn off winter now. Right, if you listened to last week's episode, you will know it was the second in what appears to be becoming a series. So I started back in episode 286 with a one-off, at least I thought it was, on things that editors hate and how to avoid them. And then last week, I did the appreciative inquiry flip take on that, and we had things that editors love. And I invited professional editors to give their thoughts. And that turned out to be a really good idea. As it always is, of course. I think asking interesting questions of interesting people, it's sort of the secret of life, really. Secret of this podcast, anyway. But last week, I collated all their answers and I put them together myself. It was kind of reported speech, if you like. And then I had a bit of a brainwave. I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could actually bring you that conversation in people's own voices rather than reporting it myself? So this week, it's a variation on a theme. I used the Extraordinary Business Book Club virtual campfire to ask the question and recorded the answers. So if you're not familiar with the Extraordinary Business Book Club virtual campfire, firstly, you'd be very welcome to come along. Join us anytime you like. It happens at 3 p.m. UK time on a Friday. And the link is in the Extraordinary Business Book Club Facebook group every week. And the format is basically a 6-minute exploratory writing sprint. I do offer a prompt. You are perfectly free to ignore it and use the time for something that you'd prefer to use the time to work on if you like. And incidentally, that the coming together for the greeting and gathering, separating for the writing sprint into kind of individual focus and creativity, and then coming back again to reflect on that process and the insights, that has always reminded me of that beautiful 2-line poem by Robert Herrick. Here we are all by day. By night we're hurled by dreams, each one into a several world. Except that dreams generally make no sense, and no one wants to hear about them. And an exploratory writing sprint makes every kind of sense, although it might not be what you expected. And for me, it's always fascinating to hear what came out of it for people. And then for the second half of the campfire, usually we would split into breakout rooms and we would just workshop issues that people have brought along with them. So it can be anything, it has been in the past how to incorporate stories, setting up a podcast, building an email list, general stuff that's relevant to people, and people choose the question that most interests them and or where they have most experience. And it's very supportive, it's very practical, it's a lot of fun. What's lovely as well is we've often had people fix up calls to continue that conversation, and I love seeing some of those connections and the friendships that have started in that group growing into really, really powerful professional partnerships. It's such a joy. But the workshopping bit isn't part of this podcast, so we focused just on the reflection for the purposes of this episode. So on Friday, it was about an average-sized campfire. There were 8 of us. Demographically, wasn't even remotely representative. So although there is a wide range of experience and backgrounds in the conversation that you're about to hear, and indeed actually there is a range of socioeconomic background and there's quite a lot of some neurodiversity, I think it is really important to recognise the underlying privilege that everyone in that group shares as white, able-bodied women. So I'd be really, really interested to hear from you if you're in a group not represented here, what resonates with you and also what you find to be different. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you will notice that I appear in this conversation as a disembodied voice. It wasn't a conscious choice. I always switch off self-view on Zoom because I just find it so distracting. I just want to be able to focus on the people that I'm talking to. And I completely forgot that meant I wouldn't appear on the video recording. So obviously it's no great loss, but it just looked a bit odd. So yeah, it wasn't deliberate. Well, not consciously anyway. So we took the prompt, as an author I have learned, and I set the timer, and then we all ignored each other and wrote furiously without stopping for 6 minutes. And then I gave everyone literally a minute or two to look back over the writing and just pull out the key points. And then I hit record. And this is what emerged. Fantastic. Right, so we have just finished our sprint, and I'm going to invite each of you in turn to obviously introduce yourself, because a lot of people listening won't know who you are, and just say, what did you come up with? What did you learn as an author? So I'm going to start with you, Felicity. Over to you.
Thank you, Alison. I'm Felicity Dyer. I'm a facilitator and trainer. I specialise in leadership management and communication skills, and I'm writing a book which is all about connection and communication. So what have I learned? Firstly, I've learned that I can write a full-length book. I've also learned that you don't absolutely have to start from scratch. Some of my work started as a blog, as handouts I'd written for courses, and a couple of my chapters actually started life as talks. Second thing I've learned is that it's really good, once you've made the firm commitment to write the book, to actually share that in public. Something I know about myself is I like to be seen as somebody who does what she'll say she's going to do. So when I put it out there on LinkedIn and got encouragement from people in my network, people saying, oh, I'm interested, looking out for the book, that was both really encouraging, but it also really firmed up my commitment. The other thing I've learned linked to that about the importance of having support. I've had support in lots of different ways, obviously from you, Alison, through your courses, your events, your groups. The other group that's been really, really helpful to me is the fabulous Networking Authors group, which is run by Glenda Shawley, who is one of your authors. And that's just been a fantastic support all the way through, and a place to go through to discuss decisions, such as which publisher to go to, and just generally get fantastic support. Just a couple more things. I think I'm learning to be a better writer, obviously, as a result of it. And one of the things I have learned, next time I write a book, I will take advice that I've heard from you than others, and I will actually plan to a much more of a level of detail. I think for me this time, and maybe it's the same for other first-time authors, just getting the words on the page, proving I could do it, was really, really important. And I've had to do quite a lot of editing. So next time, I think that I will go in with the confidence to hold back a little bit on the writing and spend a little bit more time on the planning. So that's a few thoughts from me, and I've certainly really loved in the last year spending time in the company of authors and starting to think of myself, as an author more and more. So thank you.
That's brilliant. I sort of feel we could just end the podcast there, really, but thank you, Felicity. So much of that was what I came up with as well. I think that's fantastic and brilliantly put. Thank you. Katherine, what about you?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, well, Katherine Stothart. I'm a leadership coach and author. I work mainly with Airbus and Google. And I have one book already published by Pearson called How to Get On With Anyone, which is about communication. And I'm currently writing another book to be published by Routledge later this year about motivation. It's going to be called Motivation, the Ultimate Guide to Leading Your Team, and it's aimed at leaders and managers. I feel that writing this second book, I feel like I'm drawing on a lot of learning from the experience of the first book, actually. So all sorts of things. First of all, writing a book is really hard work. Getting all that stuff that's in your head out onto the page in a way that's engaging and interesting for other people is difficult. So don't underestimate the amount of effort involved. Another area of effort is putting effort into your proposal up front. Again, I hadn't realized that really first time round, but it not only gets you a publishing contract, but also what you put in your proposal is really the core of the book and your ideas about your core ideas and how to structure the book and so on. So putting that effort in is really important. And actually, Alison Jones's book proposal challenge helped me the second time round. I managed to get one somehow without it the first time round. But so definitely put that effort in. Another thing I was surprised at first time round was having done a master's degree years ago, anything that you said in an essay, you had to prove, you had to reference it. Writing a business book, you can actually draw on your own experience, and it can be just your experience. You don't have to prove that somebody else has said it before or something. So that was a bit of a change for me. And having the advice of an editor, a good editor who will tell you things like that is really important. Because really you're creating something new. You're not just pulling together stuff from other people. You are creating something in your business book. Another thing which echoes something that Felicity said, I'm naturally a more introverted person, so I don't naturally go around telling people I'm writing a book and this is what it's about, but actually it really does help if you do. So, you know, I've interviewed people for the book, I've sent out the draft to far more readers to check it and to give me feedback this time than I did the first time round. And just having, you know, that support from people and knowing that they're interested is really working well for me this time. Well, I hope it's working well for me anyway. I feel like it is. And another thing I would say is when you say you're writing a book, people ask you, what is it about? You've got to be able to explain it simply. You have to have your elevator speech for your book. And it needs to be engaging and simple enough for them to think, oh yeah, God, that does sound good. And one final point, I'm sure others will cover this, is the first time around, I thought once it was out on the shelves, that was it. I didn't need to do anything else. Actually, there's an awful lot of marketing and effort and stuff that you do after your book is out to support it and promote it. So I feel like I've learned a lot from the first experience, but I'm sure I'm going to learn even more or as much from the second experience. So yeah, so thanks, Alison, for asking me about that.
Great, really, really good. And it's going to get harder and harder as it goes on. Penny, I'm really sorry. I know this is really mean on you, isn't it? I love that thing as well about the taking the learnings from the first book into the second. I always remember thinking that when I had my second child. Just right. Oh, I know what I'm doing now. Yeah, brilliant. Krista, what about you?
I'm Krista Powell Edwards. I am currently writing a book called Credible HR, but a better title to explain what it's about is why should anybody listen to you? How HR can be listened to, be heard, and therefore have some influence and impact in the organisation. And I write this, it's my first book, and I write it because I've spent 25, 30 years as an HR professional, helping HR professionals, working in organisations. My main pay was as a consultant and as a learner, a trainer and developer. And I mentioned that because my first learning as an author, the first thing I would come to is that writing a book is very different from writing other things, from writing articles, blogs, posts that I've been doing for years. Writing training materials, very, very different. It's a much more distinct entity, and there's lots of expectations and assumptions about it. So, for example, if you say you're writing a book, you get a very, very different response to I'm a trainer and developer or a consultant. I found a lot of it is about my mindset, actually, about my beliefs about being an author. And a professional writer, i.e. somebody who is being paid to write a book rather than design a course. And an early concern I had was, who am I to write a book? And often that came from people's response, and the fact that wasn't something that was ever suggested as a career when I was growing up. And I've learned that I had to change, that things needed to change. So my mindset, my behaviours, my diary management, my environment. As an author, I needed to change essentially myself from being a trainer and a developer. So I needed all these things that would support my writing to make me able to do it, because it is hard work, as Katherine mentioned. It needs discipline. It needs much more structure, because writing a book has less structure, ironically. You know, it has a structure, but you haven't got a step-by-step guide to writing. So it's less definite than being a trainer, more fluid and more intangible. So I've had to be so much more disciplined with my time and focus to be able to write a book. And I say the final thing that I have found challenging and that I'm learning, and I think it's important to do, is actually to assess the value of what I write. Because as a trainer and a developer and a consultant, there was a product, an outcome. And I've got to think of writing as a product now, which is not easy to do. And all the time I'm thinking, okay, how could I make this into something that's publishable and ultimately potentially gets me some income? Because if I'm a professional writer, that's how I'm going to make my income. So lots of learning for me. My book is due out this year, my first book with Routledge, and I tell you, the champagne will be out in in glasses when that happens. So there you go.
Brilliant, thank you. And the point about diary management is very well taken as well. Yes, it's a really key one, isn't it? Thank you, Krista. Love it. Alice, what about you?
Hello, hi, I'm Alice Sheldon. My book published last year, and it is called Why Weren't We Taught This at School? Slightly controversially, as I found out this afternoon. There's been a whole journey around that. But it is about needs understanding, which is a way of framing situations and your own behaviour and other people's behaviour in a way which can unlock creative solutions that you might not otherwise have thought about, and I train in that in organisations. So things I found about writing, the first thing I think is the importance of doing it in a way that fits you. So for me, you get tips from everybody about what worked for them, and that is really helpful. It's like a sort of smorgasbord of things, but you've got to actually find the things that match your strengths, your passions, your abilities. And for me, I found that what I needed was a group of people around me who I started by pulling together around the excitement of the book. I asked questions, they were readers for me, and then they went on to celebrate with me and to market for me. And that has been amazing. So I've had a group of about 100 or 150 people doing that, which was something that fitted for me. And the second thing is, it's worth doing it well and taking the time on the things that matter to you. I spent goodness knows how long on my index because I really wanted to. And just today I had someone comment, a reviewer comment, that the index felt as though it had been written for them. They could find their way around the book so easily. And I felt appreciative of that, because not everyone is an index nerd. But I think more seriously, actually finding what is important to you and hanging out for it is good. Someone was saying to me recently, you can do anything if you're marketing a good book. The book, that's the first thing in terms of getting your sales up of what you're selling for business and of the book itself. The third thing's been mentioned a number of times, but the resilience point, it is hard. And Alison, your words stick in my head. I really remember you saying to me at some meltdown point, if this were easy, everyone would do it. And it was really helpful. It kind of was a mantra that I remembered when it was tough. I think the final thing I wanted to say was just that nothing feels like holding your book for the first time. It just was a magical thing for me. I tell you, I'm only writing one. I'm like a one-child mother and a one-book author. That is enough, but the delight of this thing that I've created and that I feel so proud of, and that is carrying my message so effectively into the world. It's just lovely. You're sort of sitting there and suddenly randomly in comes something that someone's read your book and think it's amazing. And that it is the most wonderful messaging for my business that I've ever had. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Wonderful. Beaming from ear to ear. Thank you, Alice. And I noticed that the reviewer and HR director spotted the index as well. I thought Alice is going to be pleased about that. Brilliant. Thank you, Alice. Joy, what about you?
Thank you. So I'm Joy Bernford. I am writing a book called Don't Fix Women, The Practical Path to Gender Equality at Work, publishing that with Practical Inspiration Publishing, and it'll be out in November. Started this journey in, I think it was sort of January, February last year, and decided that I really wanted to write a book, and I wasn't going to be put off by the previous year of COVID, which is when I was hoping to have done it. And I've learned so much, and actually there's the challenge is actually sort of trying to whittle it down in terms of what I've learned. And the main thing, as Alison knows, when I started this journey, and I think I was in this campfire saying, I don't know quite how I'm going to do this, because I have no idea how I'm going to write a book. And I don't particularly love writing, or I didn't love writing. I have learned to love writing over this last year. It's been very hard, and actually now I've written it, I feel like I've kind of I just feel like a big weight off my shoulders, actually, because I feel personally I've lived my life thinking I can't write, and this, you know, this imposter thing, can't remember, it was Felicity saying, you know, I've kind of had this imposter in my head saying, you know, I'm no good at writing. So actually the fact that I've now come out of that is really amazing, and I can put my hand on my heart. And I often thought about getting somebody else to help me write it, and actually the fact I've done it myself is really fantastic. And then what I was, when we were talking about, you know, things I've learned as an author, what I was thinking about was how I've learned to write well, and actually that process has been really important to me. So thinking a bit like others have said, you know, having that support and team of people around me, knowing I don't have to do it all myself. I've had a fantastic support from Alison in a coach, through the courses you've run as well, and also a colleague of mine who's been working alongside me. So sort of finding ways that work for you to get that support, and don't really have to do it on your own. I think I've also learned that I write well, finding the place that works well for you and the time. So I've worked well if I've been under pressure to work in the mornings, maybe from 5 o'clock in the morning, which is hellish, but getting up at 5 till 7 and doing that before kids have got up and the day kind of takes over. And obviously I have my day job as well, so I'm not just an author. I do have running a company as well. So what I found really helped was changing my mindset about it. So I've actually, when I started, it was like I was doing my day job and fitting the book around it. Whereas then when it became easier was when I said, I'm actually an author and I'm writing this book, and my day job will fit around it. Because actually that way my head was in the book space rather than thinking, oh, I've now got to get my head in the book space to do the writing. So actually it was flipping it really helped. That's kind of took quite a while to get to that point, but when I did, it really made a big difference. The writing sprints that we've learned through the campfire has been really helpful if I'm just feeling stuck, and actually just being able to kind of scribble ideas down and not feeling you've got to get it perfect and on the paper first. Some of the things I've learned from Alison, I think somebody else mentioned this, is actually I've always written in a more of a journalistic style and felt I've had to kind of refer back to articles and that kind of thing. And actually part way through writing, I changed and found my own style of writing, and actually being able to believe in it's my view and my opinion, so I could feel, you know, comfortable writing like that. Also very small things like Alison talking about not having flabby openers, like in my opinion and that kind of thing, and cutting all that flabbiness out of the writing. It's really, really useful to know. One of the final things really is I've developed this skill for creating frameworks and models, which I've put into the book, which has really added to the credibility piece and for my own IP for the business. And I've learned that through things like Right Brained, and it's something, a skill I've discovered that I've got that I didn't know I had. So that was fantastic. So big thank you, Alison, for being on this journey and publishing the book in November. And it's very exciting to have got to where there's still a long way to go, I realise, but we're getting there.
It's so exciting to hear so much of that reflected back, and from your perspective as well. And you're right that almost drawing out the intellectual property as well as writing about it is such a great complementary skill, which you do extremely well. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Deb, what about you?
Hey all, I'm Deb Maschik, and my book is titled Collaborate. I have to look at the subtitle because it keeps changing and I feel it's way too long. So work in progress, how to build incredible collaborative relationships at work, even if you'd rather work alone. And I come at this topic as a close relationships researcher, higher ed administrator, and nonprofit executive. And so my goal in writing this book is to try to teach teams the relationships skills they need to collaborate better. And so much learning. I'm just at the beginning of the process, and so much resonance with what you all are saying too. So here's what I put in my free write. That I actually have something to say. So that felt new initially. And Alison knows that I went into the book proposal challenge going, well, choosing to write or choosing to say yes to writing a book proposal is not the same thing as choosing to write a book. And then by the end of it, I had so much fun that I signed up for the boot camp, and then I signed up to publish with Practical Inspiration, and I'm just having so much fun, which surprises me. I'm learning how all-encompassing this is. So last night, I think I probably had about 10 dreams about this dang subtitle. And it's just, my mind is rehearsing. I'll be doing dishes and an idea pops up, and I find myself wanting to carry my little digital recorder everywhere I go to grab the ideas as they're bubbling up. Another learning here is that I've really enjoyed the routine that I've set up, and this echoes, Krista, with what you were saying, to where I've had to write stuff my entire career, and this really feels like the first time that I've wanted to write. So to set aside that time and the ritual and the coffee and the biscuits in the morning, like I'm really enjoying that. Let's see, another learning here is that I think I always thought writing a book was going to be this very solitary activity, and it's been anything but. And let's see, a couple of you have mentioned this, and Alice in particular, but I find myself kind of rapid testing ideas on LinkedIn, or workshopping them with my online community over at Facebook, or throwing up an article at Psychology Today and seeing what kind of reaction it gets. And it's really clear to me, and this is foundational learning from This Book Means Business, is how it's like the business endeavor, the writing, the workshopping ideas, they're all kind of like little dolphins swimming alongside the ship. And that's been a really neat experience. And as a collaboration researcher, it's also just been really cool to see how collaborative something like this can be. Joy and Krista, you both touched on the idea of the identity shift, and that really resonates with me too, where when I first started out on this little journey, I would say, I'm thinking about maybe possibly writing a book. And now I can say it with a lot more force. I am writing this book. This is what I'm doing. This is what it's about. And so that shift from me as someone who's thinking about possibly doing this thing into the person who does this thing has been both very self-expansive, but also empowering and interesting in ways that I didn't predict. So I think that's my list. Lots in there, lots of overlap with what you other ladies have said.
Brilliant. And of course you're talking about the participation, because it's so you, and you bring that out as well. I love that idea of the dolphins, harnessing the dolphins and just letting them flow and getting good. I love that. Thank you. Brilliant. And Penny, you bring rather more than 2 books experience to this, don't you? I'm really excited to hear what you have to say.
This is my 5th book. My 5th book. And it also has collaboration in it. Oh, Zoom blurring is getting in the way. Yeah, just looking back or thinking back to before I'd written anything, and I thought sort of authors were some sort of magical being who was so much better than normal people like me. Anyway, turns out I've written or co-authored 5 books now. So yeah, and I'm not a magical being. The other thing is, not everybody gets endless rejections. I haven't had any. I shouldn't say that, should I? Touching wood. I was fired by a literary agent though, but actually it was the right thing to do, because otherwise my book Virtual Leadership would have come out way too early and been called something like Making Conference Calls Work, which wouldn't have helped in the pandemic half as much. Oh yes, new books. It's the best smell ever. I really didn't expect that at all. Yeah.
For those not on video, Alice is just sniffing her book right now.
They don't smell the same though after a bit. It's the box when you first open it up. They're just lovely. Anyway, yeah, people like my writing, and my thinking gets better when I write, because I'm editing for the 2nd edition, my first ever book, but it's not sort of official out there yet, so I probably shouldn't mention that, but I have. So, but yeah, gosh, I'm reading and thinking, gosh, this is all a bit simple, and oh boy, I can structure this better. I've got really into using mind maps for planning out my books, and now I even include them in the books, much to the publishers sort of head scratching and going, oh, how on earth are we going to put this in and it all be the right resolution? But yeah, it's so much clearer now, and the 2nd edition is going to be improved. Yeah, I'm not like Joy. I mean, being able to get up at 5 o'clock and do 2 hours writing every single day regularly. If I need to write a book, I just have to sort of stop almost everything else. Except cleaning out kitchen cupboards suddenly becomes really enticing. I mean, why? Is that just me? Or is everybody else is laughing and giggling? Yeah, not just me. So so for me, writing a book, each time I write a book, it hurts my business temporarily, but it does clarify my thinking. So it improves, I think, what clients get. It makes me an authority, literally. You know, people won't say you're not an authority because you're an author. So at the time, it's not good for cash flow. and I've just done 4 in 3 years, which was a bit dumb. But my thinking has massively improved. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, I've learned pros and cons of different types of publishing. My index isn't nearly as good as Alison's, but it only takes, the process takes between 3 and 5 hours to do. But nobody's been complimentary like they have been to Alice. So, yep. Yeah, I was amazed. The support is stunning, like several other people have said. Last year, when I launched the Making Workshops workbook, it went to #1 in a whole range of categories on both sides of the Atlantic, temporarily, on launch day and around then, and even pushed Brené Brown's latest book to #2, and I was staggered. People actually bought it. But yeah, I do need to keep that marketing going, because I tend to start focusing on the next book to write once I've launched on. So don't go from one book to another. I keep doing that and it's not very good. That's probably about it. Oh, but I had great fun. Do you remember I was fired by a literary agent? A few years later, I sat next to her colleague on a panel and had a pile of books in front of me. And the colleague was very, very, very apologetic for them having fired me.
Revenge is
Anyway,
sweet.
so that was quite nice. But yeah, you keep more if you don't have a literary agent. So there you are.
Wonderful. Thank you, Penny. Love that. And you are a magical being, actually, so that's fine. But the thing that you said about your writing makes you think better, I really picked that up as well, actually. And it's not just writing. I'm just going to try and read some of my scribbles as well. I've learned you have to talk about your stuff, and every time you do, you learn something new about it, or you see something new about it, or you understand it differently, and it's like falling in love with your subject over and over again. I got quite carried away in this sprint. And that thing about writing as well, I've learned that writing is one of the most rewarding things. I find it incredibly hard to actually sit down and get it done, but when I do, it's genuinely one of the most rewarding things ever. I feel grounded and creative and fulfilled. So that was interesting. I hadn't expected to come up with such strong words for that, but I really kind of felt it emotionally. I've also I learned that I have to leave my family to write, which is, a shame, only temporarily, but I just can't write at home. And it's partly to do with the kitchen cupboards that we were talking about earlier. Penny, you mentioned that. So it's partly that there are so many other things I could be doing at home. And it's partly just this sort of distraction. When I'm here, I feel guilty that I'm not doing domestic stuff. So when I have to get really submerged, I have to just get out, whether that's a library for an afternoon or an Airbnb for a weekend. What else have I written? I've learned you have to pre-commit. As I'm a publisher first and an author second, and I had to actually submit the proposal to my team, give them the date by which I would deliver it, which felt awful. But now I have to write it. And had I not done that, it would have just gone on forever. Come back to me if I haven't done it. But I'm sure there are people that can just set themselves a date and write, but I'm not one of them, and I don't know many of them. And I've learned that running and writing go very well together, which nobody else has mentioned, which I'm surprised about. Just something about the kind of the yin and the yang of the activeness and the sitting, but also the fact that you can cogitate very, very well when you're, I'm sure walking is good too, but running is particularly good because you get into a sort of trance state. I've learned to do a 6-minute sprint before I start any writing session, because it just kind of clears my head and helps me go, well, what do I really need to get done? What do I really need to say in this? And the last one was I've learned not to be precious about my ideas, because they aren't a scarce commodity. It is all about the execution, and it's all about expansion and connection. And that does feel quite transformative, because I think most authors, and certainly when I was starting to write books, I kind of kept it small and precious and nurtured this flame and wrote about it. And it takes time to kind of relax into talking to other people about it. But my goodness, when you do, the connection, the expansion of the idea, the way they go, oh, and have you thought of that? And you need to speak to this person. That has just been phenomenal for me. So, and it's really good to hear other people say that too. So that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, people. Brilliantly. Somehow we've brought it in exactly podcast length. Yay us. So, so thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording here, and it'll be out soon. Just so much wisdom there. And what's remarkable, I think, is if you just remember that all of that came out of literally 6 minutes of exploratory writing, I hadn't primed them beforehand or anything. It is just such a powerful way to focus your attention and not just pull together your thoughts, but notice the stuff beneath the surface. And what struck me too was that interplay between shared experience and personal significance, and also the way that people's answers embraced the most practical tips alongside really profound questions of identity and purpose. So I hope that you found or heard something there that resonated with you, that you can take away and try out, or even just that you feel encouraged in the face of what, let's face it, is a really long old slog. And as Felicity said right at the start, one of the things that she's learned is the value of spending time with other business book authors, and that keeps coming up. So if you're writing a business book, don't do it alone. Join the Extraordinary Business Book Club on Facebook. Introduce yourself. Come along to a campfire or two. I think you'll be amazed at how energising and encouraging it is just to hang out with other people on this journey, and also how much you'll learn from them. And if you're inspired to do some exploratory writing for yourself, then come and join me on the 24th of March at Gladstone's Library in Flintshire. The sign-up link is on the show notes at extraordinarybusinessbooks.com. That day is going to include refreshments and a 2-course lunch, which frankly is going to be worth the very low price on its own. They do cracking food at Gladstone's. I know I keep banging on about it. Honestly, it's just the most incredible place. I would love to live there. If they could just put a sleeping bag on the floor of the library, I'd be happy. Last week, I shared something from my rich reading of Invisible Work by John Howkins, who's going to be on the podcast shortly, I'm very pleased to say. And this week, I've been revisiting Flow, The Psychology of Happiness by, of course, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I'm not rereading the whole thing, but I'm focusing on the chapters on attention and the flow of thought as part of the research of my own book on exploratory writing. And I had forgotten just how explicit he is about the purpose of writing in that book, which is very helpful for me. So I'm just going to read you a short section, and you're going to be charmed at the start by how ancient it sounds. It was written in 1992, and obviously communication technology has come on a bit since then. In today's world, we've come to neglect the habit of writing because so many other media of communication have taken its place. Telephones and tape recorders, computers and fax machines are more efficient in conveying news. If the only point of writing were to transmit information, then it would deserve to become obsolete. But the point of writing is to create information, not simply to pass it along. In the past, educated persons used journals and personal correspondence to put their experiences into words, which allowed them to reflect on what had happened during the day. The prodigiously detailed letters so many Victorians wrote are an example of how people created patterns of order out of the mainly random events impinging on their consciousness. The kind of material we write in diaries and letters does not exist before it is written down. It is the slow, organically growing process of thought involved in writing that lets the ideas emerge in the first place. And I think in a world where copy and paste is ubiquitous, and we start almost every new project by seeing if there's an example online we can take as a starting point, that distinction, that the point of writing is to create information, not simply to pass it along, I think that's crucial. And for me, it's one of the best uses of exploratory writing, to give ourselves space to work out our own ideas before we start Googling for other people's. And I'm really enjoying that rich reading practice. It is so qualitatively different from all the other kinds of reading that I do. It's more like having a conversation with the author. I think it works particularly well when you already know the book and you aren't reading simply to understand the ideas, but you're really grappling with them to see what they mean to you right now, where you are. So if you haven't tried it, give it a go. Just pick up a book that you remember being particularly interesting or helpful, go to a chapter that seems particularly promising, and just spend half an hour or so with a notebook, really engaging with the text. I would love to hear what you discover if you give it a try. This week's 3 hot new reads, in brief, potentially future classics as well, I guess, are The High-Tech CEO, How to Lead R&D When You're Not the Expert by Jan Rosier, which is out on the 8th of February. The Science of Selling, Proven Strategies to Make Your Pitch, Influence Decisions and Close the Deal by David Hoffelt, which is also on the 8th of February, and Making Light Work, An End to Toil in the 21st Century by David Spencer, which is out on the 11th of February. Well, it is on Amazon. It's out on the 3rd of February everywhere else. Yeah, Amazon's a bit of a law unto itself these days. I hope you like the sound of at least one of those. Do let me know what you think if you read it, or indeed if you read all of them. And that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed that, and as I say, you're very welcome to join us around the Extraordinary Business Book Club virtual campfire this Friday at 3 p.m. UK time. The link is in the Extraordinary Business Book Club Facebook group. And I'll be back here next week for more business book chat. So in the meantime, keep on reading and writing those extraordinary business books. Goodbye for now.